I said I would never review this because it had been so long since I'd read it, and also I wasn't really sure how to review a graphic novel, but I recently reread this for the third time, so I'm gonna figure out how to review this. Because I love this story so much. Lore Olympus is a Persephone Hades retelling that was originally published on Webtoon. It blends ancient mythology with modern life in a really fun way where the gods have cell phones and they can go into the mortal realm, but there's also the sort of feel of Greek mythology to it, which is really nice. If you need a break from heavy novels, this is a really fun, like, in-between books type of thing. There are a couple different volumes though. I believe this is still online on Webtoon, but it might be some of the older versions because I know that the artist ended up changing and like redoing some of them as their art style evolved. If you are gonna read the hard copy, there's different volumes. So this is the first section of the story. I think there are 3 volumes out right now. And while this story is going to be familiar because it is a retelling, I don't want to spoil you. So if you have not read it, make sure to go read it and then come back so we can discuss. Goodbye to non-spoiler people. We open up on the night of Zeus's birthday party, and Hades is planning to take Minthe, who is a nymph from the underworld, with him. In theory, boyfriend and girlfriend, but Minthe is not very nice to him at all. And she stands him up on the way to the party, which is lucky for our main character Persephone, because since Hades is not distracted, he sort of notices her, but then he says that she puts Aphrodite to shame, which is like the number one thing you don't do in Greek mythology. It's such an easy rule. But since we're in this modern world, instead of like, I don't know how the Greek gods theoretically like call one another, but Aphrodite pulls out her phone and she sends like an angry cat emoji to her son, Eros, saying that she needs his help. And they have like just such cute exchanges. Like, I feel like the characters in this are so fun to follow because they have such personality. Eros doesn't want to come because he has another event that he's going to, and he's talking about the shirt that he's wearing, and she's like, oh, is it the salmon one? He's like, yes, I'm the cutest. One thing that I really like is this sort of mixed art style. So sometimes we get these more full-fledged images, and then other times we get like the sketches, which feel like sort of rougher and undone, but I really, really like it. In this one in particular, it's really funny because Hades is watching Persephone from afar, and the thing is that Persephone is right now living with Artemis. And of the 3, the big 3 brothers, Poseidon is definitely like the goofiest, and he comes up and tells Hades like, oh, you're watching her? Unfortunately, she's with Artemis, who hates you. And we get to see a little bit of Hades' personality where he's like sarcastically being like, really? I had not noticed. At this point, Eros has arrived at the party, and his mother pretty much wants to take revenge on Persephone for something that Zeus said. Obviously not cool, but Eros is used to doing what his mother says and obeying her. So he drugs Persephone, like gives her a drink, but it obviously like makes her way more drunk than she would have been. And he realizes like what had happened, and he's asking his mom like, why are you jealous of her? But because this is written like more modern, he's holding up Persephone and he's like, she is a cinnamon roll, a pink cinnamon roll. Why are you jealous of a cinnamon roll? It's just, I just love these little like, I don't know if that's like a pop culture thing to say, but it's definitely not something that would have been in the original like Greek story of this. He puts her in the back of Hades' car as sort of as a joke, not a nice joke, but a joke, because Aphrodite thinks that when Persephone wakes up in the back of his car in the underworld, she's going to freak out and think that Hades is a creep, and that Hades will realize that he doesn't like her that much. And of course Aphrodite is the most beautiful goddess, which makes no sense mentally, but that's her plan. Eros actually feels bad about this. He is a really sweet personality himself. The only reason he's doing this is because he wants Psyche back, which we will get to later. Persephone, while she's completely knocked out, has a nightmare, and we get to see a really nice glimpse of her background. Not nice, but I like the way it was done. There's a lot of flashbacks in this story that feel supernatural. It doesn't feel like we're getting pulled out of the narrative at all. And I really like how the color palette changes. Since each character has their own color, when we end up around different characters and stuff, naturally there's a palette shift. And I feel like that really moves us through the story in a really nice way and also mixes things up. So you're not looking at images that all look similar at the same time, being able to see it visually like that. Anyway, Persephone has a nightmare about her past. Her mother is Demeter, who is sort of notoriously known for locking Persephone up. She's so scared that something's going to happen to her daughter that she actually tricks Persephone into going into this greenhouse. And Persephone is the goddess of spring, so she is constantly sprouting flowers. That's kind of her job. And so a greenhouse is like a perfect gift for her, and she's so excited, and she runs in just to realize that there's no door out, and her mom has trapped her in there. And that sort of emphasizes to us how hard it was for Persephone to kind of get her mother to allow her out, because the idea is that she is going to school and living in Olympus, which is, in our case, a sort of modern city, whereas she's used to being in the mortal realm where her mother is very traditional, and she kind of almost comes from that more traditional Greek mythology background, while these other gods have really modernized. But it is also like canon that Persephone is having issues controlling her powers, and so when she wakes up and touches Hades' hand, she accidentally like poofs a flower crown around her head, which was so cute. And I feel like the trope in this is very grumpy sunshine. So Hades is obviously the grumpy one, and Persephone is the sunshine character. Obviously, in not every version of this story, Persephone and Hades don't always it's not always super romantic. Like, he did steal her in the original. In more modern retellings, it's usually Persephone's choice to be with him, but he's showing her around the house and offers her coffee, which she doesn't drink coffee, but she takes it anyway because she has sort of got like an insta crush on Hades right now. And she sees a text from Minthy. I loved this little like section of the story, and she's like, "Oh, is that your lover?" And then there's just the funniest little clip where she's like, "Find a filter." So she's asking what happened, because she also is not like hundreds of years old like the older gods. She is, I think, like 18, and actually 18, not just like she looks 18. She is super sheltered, so she doesn't really know like how alcohol would affect her. She's like, "Oh, it's my fault, like I drink too much, like I don't know what to do about this." And Hades tells her the truth, that it was his fault, that he said that she put Aphrodite to shame. And Persephone's like, "No, it was definitely me making Eros mad somehow. Like, I don't know what I did." Like, she can't believe him. And before he can really, convince her of what actually happened, she meets his multiple dogs. But of course, the most famous one is Cerberus. Is that how you say it? And we get this little like aside frame where Hades is walking Cerberus, and this lady's like, "Oh, his coat is so shiny, like what do you feed him?" And he's like, "The souls of the dead and sometimes egg whites." At this point, he takes her back to Olympus, because the problem was, the reason he had her stay in the underworld overnight is because he doesn't actually know where she lives. He didn't realize she actually stays at Artemis's house. But as he's on his way out, paparazzi sees them and takes a couple pictures, which is going to be a problem, I believe, in volume 2. It didn't really come back in this one, but I have on Webtoon, I read ahead of what is in volume 1. So there's like a couple things that pop up later with that. She gets back to Artemis's house, and she's obviously she hates Hades, and she's like, "Oh, did he touch you?" Like blah 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 blah. And she's so angry, and Persephone's like, "No, not at all." And then we get these little frames of touch points, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So on top of being kind of from the older version of the Greek god's world, she doesn't have a cell phone. And Artemis says this could have been avoided if you had had a cell phone and could have called me. And she's like, "It doesn't matter if Demeter doesn't want you to have a cell phone, because in this world you need one," which is just so so relatable to our real world. I don't think you could even move around without a cell phone. So it makes total sense. If they are in modern world, Persephone needs a cell phone, so Artemis gives her old one, which is cracked and messed up. But Persephone is just over the moon about this. She learns how to take pictures with it. It was so cute. She wanted pictures of her and Artemis together. Eros shows up to apologize to Persephone. Another thing that I just loved about these illustrations is how clear the emotions are on their faces, even though technically these drawings are simple. There's not tons of detail to them, but it's like I wasn't looking at individual little frames. It was like I was watching a cartoon, and I could hear the sound effects. It was just, I had such a great time with this. So when she sees Eros, she squints at him, she's like, "You." And then some of the fun stuff in this book is sometimes you'll see the Greek gods go back to their old forms. And so Artemis immediately like transforms into like warrior Artemis to protect and attack. And theoretically, no boys are allowed inside the home, but that never is upheld. Eros manages to talk his way into the house, and this is when we learn his backstory with Psyche. So apparently, somebody had said that Psyche, a human woman, was more beautiful than Aphrodite. Again, something that you do not do. So she tells him to go down to Earth and get Psyche to fall in love with the most ugly monster that he could possibly find. But once he gets there, he realizes that she's in like a horrible arranged marriage situation, and he falls in love with her. So he ends up putting on this mask and saves her from her wedding and pretends to be the most ugly creature that she's ever seen and takes her away. A loophole. The problem is that Eros doesn't tell her who he is, and it's just a huge misunderstanding. And Psyche's sisters show up and they're like, he is not who you think he is, like take this dagger, like figure it out. And eventually one night she goes into his room and has this dagger like ready to kill him, and Eros doesn't really stop to think. He tells his mom everything, and Aphrodite obviously like comes to the rescue of her son and steals Psyche, and now she has her hidden away. It didn't take Eros even that long to be like, oh, I maybe shouldn't have told her about that. Actually, it was a misunderstanding and I love Psyche. I want to be with her. But now Aphrodite uses Psyche as a bargaining chip to get him to do her bidding. Great parenting. I felt like in this story, they sort of had a more brother-sister relationship, but it also sort of makes sense because they're both supposed to be like super beautiful gods, so they're probably used to getting what they want. But still, it made me very upset that she took Psyche and just like, there was no end date on when he was gonna get her back. So at this point, he's just sobbing uncontrollably, and Persephone and Artemis are like, what do we do about this? And so Persephone's like, well, Hades gave me like a really beautiful coat. Do you want to see it? Which led to some of my favorite frames in the whole story when Eros tries it on and he's just like, I'm beautiful. And he's like, can I have it? And it's just like the girliest, fluffy, fake fur coat. So cut to brunch with the big three brothers. And it's so funny. Like, I know that they're supposed to be like gods of the whole world, but they're showing up to this restaurant and they're trying to get in, and the server is looking at the do not serve list, and it's just the pictures of them. And she's like, I can't serve you. And the other two brothers are trying to argue it, and Hades is just in the background like... So they start talking. They get in, they're able to eat and whatever. But Hades tells them that he was gonna propose to Minthy at Zeus's birthday party, which I just thought was like, why? I understand that he sort of feels left out. Both of his brothers are married, and he's like, well, I thought Minthy would be an okay enough queen of the underworld. And Hades like pulls out the ring to show them, and Zeus says, my sweet blue idiot, what is that? And like, thank goodness Minthy wasn't there, obviously, because the way she treats him, like, we don't even see that much of Minthy, and you still feel just how horrible she is to him. And she's very like hot and cold. Like, she'll be so nice to him when she wants something and then like just brush him off every other time. And it's such an abusive relationship for him. We get the cutest of flashbacks when Hera has a flashback to seeing Persephone when she's really little. She's probably like 7-ish. At a party, and she's so nice to Persephone, and it's just the cutest thing because obviously Hera and Demeter are friends, so she was, you know, being nice to her friend's daughter, but it comes from like a good place, and I feel like we don't get to see that out of Hera in other Greek mythology stories because so much of her character is based on being frustrated by her husband cheating. And so when Hera shows up and she finds her husband and Hades and Poseidon talking about Persephone, she gets really annoyed and is like, careful how you talk about her type of thing. Meanwhile, since Persephone said that the coat Hades gave her was sort of the only modern thing she has, Eros like insisted that they go shopping. And so they're at the mall and they meet up with Apollo and Hermes. So Apollo is Artemis's brother, and then Hermes is like side friend. Apollo is giving where's my hug energy. He makes a bunch of jokes about Hades that makes Persephone really uncomfortable. And then Artemis lets them come into the house, and Persephone is obviously like just clearly not okay with the situation. She's like, why are there boys in the house like we already said? And Artemis just sort of brushes it off. She's like, oh, Apollo's my brother, it's fine. Apollo later forces himself on her and it's horrible. And she ends up feeling like the only person she can talk to, not about the situation, but just kind of in general, like she's looking for comfort. She texts Hades because they gave each other their business cards, it was so cute because Hades is just like very plain and whatever. And then Persephone accidentally gives him the wrong one with her old name, Corey, on it. It was very cute and handmade and just precious. She previously texted him like, hey, it's me. And she didn't realize at the time that like when you text someone, your name doesn't automatically pop up. And so Hades didn't know it was her and just sort of, threw the phone into the back seat and just didn't look at it for however long. And then she texts him one more time and she's like, I know you're busy, like, just thanks for the coat, which obviously now this is gonna jog Hades' memory. Hades is asleep when the text comes through and he is also having a nightmare. And we see little baby Hades. It's so cute. His name is Idonius at this point. His nightmare is about Kronos eating him because Kronos, had, I guess, a prophecy that his kids were going to kill him pretty much. And so he eats his children. I don't exactly remember what happened in all that, but obviously somehow, the Greek gods that are the most famous ones, they overcame that. And he wakes up in a cold sweat and he's like, fine, I'll make an appointment to talk to my therapist. But now that he's awake, that's when he picks up the phone and he sees the double text and realizes what's happened. And the last frame that we get is him calling Persephone. There is a little bonus chapter that we get from Hera's birthday party a long time ago when Hades tried to give her the coat that he ends up giving Persephone. And Hera, when she touches it, she has a vision of the future of Hades getting married. And she can't see who it's to because there's a veil in front of, obviously, Persephone's face. But since she doesn't know who it's for, when she gets the gift from Hades, she rejects the gift, which is kind of unlike her. And Zeus is like, why are you doing this? This is kind of embarrassing. But she knows that Hades is going to need that later. So she's like, you should keep it for a later date. Which I'm kind of surprised that Hades would have kept it, but luckily he did. And that was a nice little full circle moment because when we find out early on in the story that Hades had tried to give it to a goddess and she rejected it, it was kind of like, okay, like what happened there? So it was nice to see that. And we got a note from the author that it was originally included in the story, but it sort of messed with the flow at the time. So now it's a bonus chapter in this book. I absolutely loved this. Like, I'd probably give it like an 8 or 9 out of 10 just because I want the rest of the story. And so that's not this book's fault. I think after reading so many fantasy novels, this feels so short, like not enough plot, but obviously there's just so much artwork in here that we need it to be in separate volumes unless we wanted just the heaviest book you've ever seen. Also, because I love Hades and Persephone retellings, and like, do we have any confirmation? I feel like there are so many more retellings out there that we don't know about because Midnight Sun, there's notes in here that make it feel like a Hades and Persephone retelling. I don't know if we've ever gotten any full confirmation on this, but obviously pomegranate, which there were no pomegranates in Lore Olympus. But the classic story is that Persephone goes to the underworld, and because she eats something from there, in her case, pomegranate seeds, she is bound to the underworld. And so in this book, like, well, obviously on the front cover, we have the pomegranate. And then Edward sort of like in his mind, because Midnight Sun is from his perspective, he sort of is talking about how like he's the underworld, like he's dead, and he doesn't want to be like the thing that ties her to death and stuff like that. I don't know if he quotes the actual like Greek story, but it is very much like Persephone vibes. And I also saw someone like a long time ago, I'd posted a video about Fourth Wing and theories and stuff like that. And then somebody had mentioned, I think it's Andarna's name. There's some sort of link between Andarna and like the idea of Persephone and stuff like that. I cannot remember. I will try to find it and like overlay it on the screen. But it was just so interesting to think that that could also be a Persephone retelling, because if you have not read Iron Flame, like, go ahead and mute this. I will put a picture of Iron Flame here and then take it down when the spoilers are over. Don't spoil yourself. Picture. So at the end of Iron Flame, obviously, Xaden dies. He becomes Venin. And so now we get this sort of same dynamic of the guy is from the underworld and then the girl is still like alive. And Violet, like Persephone's whole thing is that she makes flowers and stuff like that. So the name Violet seems to be kind of fitting there, because I think our big question for book 3 of Fourth Wing is going to be like, how does she pull him out of the underworld, or does she end up getting sucked in by him, or does it end up being a lovers to enemies story? If it is, I don't know. But that's why I feel like those stories could kind of be Persephone-ish in theme and stuff like that. And then obviously there are the more outward retellings of Touch of Darkness and stuff like that. If you have any other good retellings, particularly between these characters, but also any just Greek stories, I would love to hear them. I feel like I ended up reading a lot of Greek mythology stuff in college, but a lot of that stuff is just, it's real sad and kind of depressing. So some fun retellings would be great. Please like this video if you liked it. Click subscribe if you want to talk about more book stuff. My name's Katelyn. Thanks for watching. Bye.